Hey guys, tonight we slip into the flickering torchlight of a Viking longhouse at the crack of dawn, where you and your fellow shield maidens are about to swear your first ever blood oath. No pressure, right? You probably won't survive this sacred ritual if you're squeamish around spilled mead or the sight of a sharpened sayax gleaming in the smoky air. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your local location and time in the comments so we know where in the world you're tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. As the first pale rays of sunlight slip through the narrow windows, you drag your feet across the cold flagstones, the scent of pine torches mingling with last night's lingering mead breath. Around you, the longhouse stretches like a hulking beast, beamed ceilings dripping with ancient runes and shields hung like gruesome trophies. You shuffle into a rough-hewn circle, the other women's braided hair brushing your elbow, and a hush falls heavy enough to muffle even the crackle of the hearth. At this precise moment, right before your heart flutters into your throat, you press your palm to a communal blade, its iron edge still warm from the smith's forge. You lean forward, nicking your thumb and letting a single droplet of blood fall onto the metal. It's equal parts terrifying and oddly cathartic, like an ancient group therapy session overseen by Odin himself. Here you swear a solemn blood vow binding your fate to the clan and to each other for life. Remember that raid on Lindisfarne back in 793 AD when the Northumbrian monks never saw it coming. That's the kind of reputation you're building one oath at a time. Historians still debate whether these vows were inspired by Celtic warriors or homegrown Norse custom. But either way, the goosebumps you feel aren't just from the cold. By the time the bloodied blade is wiped clean, you can feel the weight of centuries pressing on your shoulders. There's an odd hush as the shadows of your sisters stretch across the earthen floor, each curve of braided leather and burnished steel telling its own tale of past victories and defeats. A strange archaeological fact whispers in the back of your mind. Some Viking graves have been found with fox skulls laid at the feet of female warriors, perhaps to guide their spirits home. You wonder if your own skull will someday rest under moss and turf, telling tales to future diggers who will marvel at your courage or chuckle at your fashion choices. Seriously, that woolen cloak was a splurge. You feel the rough linen of your tunic against your cheek, an unexpected comfort in all the solemnity. And you share a fleeting grin with the woman next to you, because even in the darkest traditions, you need a teammate to roll your eyes with. As the final murmured word of commitment fades, you rise from the circle heart, pounding like a battle drum. Ahead lies the clang of steel, the roar of ships cutting through icy waves, and the promise that once you swear this oath, there's no turning back, unless you fancy a life of eternal shame parked at the village well, and trust me, that's a fate worse than dragon breath on leftover meat pies. The hush from the blood oath still lingers in your chest as you slip from the longhouse's communal hearth into a smaller side room where the elder awaits by a low wooden bench. He's hunched over a rough-hewn plank, tiny chips of ash wood spilling onto the earthen floor like pale snowflakes. You pause at the threshold, drawing in a deep breath of smoky torchlight and pine sap, the two scents dancing together in a surprisingly pleasant way, like someone burned a pine-scented candle inside a blacksmith's workshop. The elder's gnarled fingers grip a sharp bone stylus, and with each deliberate stroke, he carves sacred runes along the length of a slender wooden talisman. Nearby lie dozens of half-finished amulets, each one destined for a shield maiden's belt or neck. You shuffle forward, boots crunching on chipped stone, and kneel before the workbench, the torchlight throwing flickering shadows across your tunic. The cool wood feels smooth and alive beneath your palm, as if the grain itself is humming with promise. A keen rasp fills the room as the stylus etches into the wood, punctuated by the distant drip of water from the longhouse roof. You close your eyes and let the steady rhythm ground you. The rune shapes are strangely hypnotic, each curve and line leading your mind toward Odin's favor. It's almost like staring at loading circles on a messenger app back home, only more mystical, and you can't accidentally swipe them away. You probably won't survive without these blessings, so best pay attention, more than you do, to your phone's terms and conditions. As the elder pauses to dip the carving tool in black ochre pigment, you catch sight of a crude iron knife strapped to your hip. You run a finger along its spine, recalling tales of the siege of Paris in 845 A.D., when Norse fleets sheeted in from the Seine, and shield maidens fought shoulder to shoulder with berserker brothers. Their shields were laden with runic talismans, just like this one, believed to ward off both enemy blows and the chill that seeped into bones after long days on the river. Even today, reenactors swear by hand-carved runes to keep frostbite at bay, though some blame the extra wool socks. A strange archaeological fact tickles your thoughts at a Viking settlement in Ribe, Denmark. Archaeologists uncovered a broomstick with tiny runic inscriptions hidden under its bristles, perhaps an ancient method to sweep away more than just dirt. Historians still debate whether those carvings were protective charms against domestic gremlins or just a bored housewife's doodles. Either way, you let out a quiet chuckle, imagining medieval laundry day being as eventful as a berserker raid. The elder leans in close, his breath carrying the tang of mead and juniper berries. He whispers the ancient formula words that feel like ice on your tongue before pressing the talisman into your palm. Instantly, you feel a subtle warmth seep into your fingers, as though the small piece of carved wood has absorbed a flicker of his own life force. It's a bit like slipping into your favorite wool cloak after a long day, snug, reassuring, and somehow imbued with magic. You tuck the talisman under your tunic, right above your heart, where it nestles comfortably against your chest. It's as if you've strapped on a miniature power bank to recharge your courage right when you need it. No Odin-approved outlet required. A little half-smile tugs at your lips when you imagine texting Odin a quick thanks bro emoji, but your lips press together to keep the humor in check. After all, the other women are watching, and you'd rather not face a chorus of eye rolls when you need them most. Above you, the carved runes catch the torchlight, their edges glowing like coded instructions only the cynosure can decipher. You trace each symbol: Elgiz for protection, Tiwaz for victory, and Ansuz for divine guidance. It's almost overwhelming how a few scratches on wood can carry such weight, like accidentally selecting airplane mode and realizing you're still getting Wi-Fi. You press your thumb against the deepest groove, feeling reassurance pool through your veins. The elder steps back, his job complete, and nods with a satisfied grunt. You rise, feeling the talisman's presence pressed gently against your ribs. The room seems brighter, the torch flame steadier, as if acknowledging your newly fortified spirit. You glance once more at the scattered wood chips, each one a fragment of divine promise, and scoop a handful into your palm, letting the splinters fall to the clay floor. With a final glance at the elder, you rise fully, the weight of the runic blessings settling around you like a well-worn cloak. Ahead lies more rituals, war paint, feasts, chants. But for now you carry within you a silent strength older than any steel blade. You slip back into the main hall, ready for the next step in this sacred preparation, knowing that each carved rune whispers of survival unity and a fierce bond that even the frost of far-flung fjords cannot break. You slide from the flickering torchlight of the ritual chamber into the open hall, the scent of pine pitch still clinging to your skin. Here beside a low trestle strewn with coils of raw hide and lengths of braided leather, you set down the talisman and confront your hair, your proud banner of identity, and the unlikeliest piece of battle kit you'll ever assemble. With a slow exhale, you pull the tousled strands between your palms. The fibers are slightly stiff from yesterday's wave-infused rinse, but you welcome the texture. It reminds you of the rough hemp rope on the longship's prow, stubborn and ready to hold fast in stormy seas. First, you gather 2 thick sections at your temples, twisting each into a rope braid as though you're coaxing a live serpent into submission. The repetitive motion twist, cross, pull grounds you like lacing up your modern-day running shoes for a daunting marathon. There's no turning back once those straps click into place. You press each newly formed braid against your skull-knotted leather strips, wrapped around their bases like miniature harnesses. The snap of the leather buckle under your thumb echoes the distant clang of steel on steel from the forge you passed earlier, a satisfying counterpoint to the low murmur of the clan women, busy at their own preparations. A faint breeze drifts through the open doorway, carrying the cool dampness from the fjord outside. You feel tiny goosebumps ripple across your scalp as you loop another leather thong around the braid, weaving it through your hair so that it supports your forthcoming helm. The smell of cured hide rises earthy, almost smoky, and you can't help but think it's the Viking equivalent of slipping into a well-worn leather jacket. Instantly, you stand taller, braver somehow. More you. You tug gently at the loose ends, securing the braid with a final double knot that clicks softly. A stray wisp of hair brushes your cheek, and you tuck it behind your ear, grateful that modern eyeliner trends won't bleed into war-painted chaos tomorrow morning. As you move to the next section, your fingers work with an almost mechanical precision, braiding each lock into a length sturdy enough to anchor your armored hood. The clack of wooden comb teeth on tangled hair rhythms out a confidence-boosting beat, and you hum a low tune your mother once sang a lullaby about sea serpents and brave warriors. It feels strange and comforting, like swapping out a battle cry for a bedtime story. Behind you, another shield maiden pops a strand of hair into her mouth, biting down to hold it in place for a moment before weaving it into her own braid, and you exchange a quick grin. It's a small solidarity pact, a promise that neither of you will giggle when someday archaeologists unearth your perfectly styled plaits. Your mind drifts to the Battle of Clontarf in 1014 A.D., where Irish and Norse forces clashed so fiercely the very earth trembled under the roar of thousands. Imagine that you think women at your side, their hair braided to withstand the gale of swords and axes, each knot emblematic of personal resolve. It wasn't just the men who made history on that bloody plain. Shield maidens stood shoulder to shoulder with berserkers, their wooden bucklers raised against arrows and steel. A surge of pride ripples through you, tightening the braid under your palm. Yet, there's a curious archaeological footnote that tickles the edges of your memory. When excavators dug at Birka in Sweden, they found a grave of a woman laid to rest with weapons, gaming pieces, and a hefty knife. Everything a warrior might need, save for the longships. The hair remnants preserved in the soil reveal expertly braided locks surprisingly similar to what you wear today. Historians still debate whether these burials reflect genuine battlefield roles for women or ritual status symbols meant to impress visiting dignitaries at festivals. Either way, it's wicked to think that centuries ago, someone else braided in bits of leather just like you, maybe humming their own pre-battle chorus to steady their nerves. Now you lie back on the low bench legs extended as the clan's leatherworker passes by with a coil of extra thick thong. "Need a hand?" she asks, voice soft as moss. You nod, and she sits beside you. Her own locks a tapestry of knots and loops. Together, you wind the final leather strips around your braids, securing each one with a small bronze clasp shaped like a raven's head. The metal is cool, but it warms quickly under the pressure of your pulse, reminding you that you carry not just hair and leather, but the sheer will of every shield maiden who came before. With all braids complete, you stand and reach for the mail shirt laid out over a low table. The hood of interlinked rings drapes over your head like a waterfall of silver, the weight more comforting than burdensome. Each braided rope guides a seam of mail to sit perfectly around your neck, the leather knots preventing any pinching. You tug at one braid, testing its tension, and it holds firm. No chance of slipping when the battle's crescendo turns into a whirlwind of shield wall clashes. Pulling the leather cords tight, you feel your courage coil alongside the metal rings, ready to spring into action. Stepping away from the bench, you brush off stray wood chips and leather shavings, patting your braids to ensure they lie smooth. For a moment, you glance at your reflection in a polished bronze shield, your face framed by neat rows of braids and leather straps, eyes bright with anticipation. It's an image you'll carry into the chaos of the coming raid, a silent vow stitched into every strand. As you head toward the next ritual war paint and feasting, you can't help but run a final finger along one braid and feel the reassuring solidity beneath your touch. In a few hours, you'll be charging with the roar of the longship crew behind you. But right now, you're anchored in this quiet moment of preparation, each twist binding you closer to destiny. And if you survive, those braided leather straps might just tell a tale worth retelling whenever you finally hang up your helmet. You step into the chill dawn air at the edge of the longhouse, the wooden walls behind you still warm from last night's hearth. In front of you lies a low bench laden with shallow bowls of red ochre charcoal dust and chalk-white clay, each pigment cradled in a hollowed-out animal horn. You kneel, fingertips grazing the cool rims, and inhale the earthy aroma of crushed minerals mixed with a faint tang of stale mead, like a nail salon gone rogue if someone sprinkled barbecue dust instead of acetone in the air. With a deep breath, you scoop a pinch of red ochre between thumb and forefinger, feeling the powder slip silkily through the creases of your skin. You press it against your cheekbone, dragging it upward in a bold streak that flares like a Viking sunrise. The grainy warmth tingles across your skin, reminding you of sun-baked sandstone cliffs you've never seen, but have definitely scrolled past on Instagram. You laugh softly, best not to sneeze now, or you'll resemble a crimson raccoon mid-mascara meltdown. Next comes the charcoal, a stiff stick, blacker than a raven's wing, snapped in two to expose fresh edges. You dip the stub in a shallow pool of animal fat, patting off the excess, so it won't drip like an overzealous eyeliner wand. Then, with a steadying exhale, you trace a half-moon beneath your eye, the soot smudging slightly as it meets fine, downy hairs at your temple. The effect is fierce, like you've borrowed your brother's goth makeup kit. But it's meant to channel Freya's own battle gaze, not your cousin's Halloween costume. Behind you, one of the younger shield maidens hums a tune about a Jotun wrestling a whale, her voice soft enough to hush even the murmuring fjord breeze. You pause to listen, letting the chant guide your next stroke of chalk-white clay across your forehead. The pale line arches like the prow of a longship, slicing through the spray, the chalk's grit tickling your forehead hairs. You blink twice, don't want to end up with a glare so bright you blind your own comrades mid-raid, then smooth the pigment with the heel of your palm, each press grounding you further in the ritual. As your mirrored reflection shimmers in a brackish water bowl at your feet, you study the glyph-like patterns forming across your skin, crimson/underbone, ebony curve around eye-white arch above brow. You look honestly like a fledgling war painter's demo board, but by Odin's beard, you trust it more than any steel cuirass. A strange footnote drifts through your thoughts. Archaeologists unearthed a grave at Kaupang containing flakes of red pigment pulverized with animal fat near a woman's skeleton, suggesting female warriors carried personal war paint kits. Historians still debate whether those pigments served purely cosmetic vanity or held genuine supernatural power worthy of the gods. Either way, you're counting on both. You finish by pressing your palms together, fingertips pointing skyward in a silent salute. The remaining dust clings to your calloused fingertips and falls in a soft patter to the ground like powdered sugar in a bakery you'll never open. You breathe in one last time, tasting clay and charcoal on your tongue, a flavor as foreign and familiar as a dream you almost remember. Rising to your feet, you catch sight of the longhouse threshold beyond which awaits the feasting hall and the Valkyrie chant. But for a moment, time stands still. You painted in battle's palette, embodying the fierce legacy of shield maidens who strode into the fray long before any modern mascara line hit the market. You brush a stray lock away from your painted cheek and feel an electric thrill ripple through your veins, sharper than the first blow of an axe against iron. In the distance, you hear the faint clang of metal and the murmur of hungry voices. With war paint set and courage painted on your soul, you step forward, ready to transform pigment into prowess color, into courage, and ritual, into the roar that will carry you across the deck of the longship and into legend. The scent of roasting boar and spiced barley porridge hits you the moment you push open the heavy oak door of the feasting hall, mingling with the tang of spilled mead and the ever-present pine smoke that makes everything feel like a Viking-themed barbecue gone gloriously off script. You slip inside the low benches, groaning under the weight of leathers, iron belts, and shield edges that have already survived one ritual and are now ready for seconds. Because nothing says courage before battle like someone elbowing you for the last hunk of smoked fish. You weave between clusters of shield maidens and brothers, each cluster balanced on either side of a long trestle table, heaped with hunks of salted meat, coarse bread bowls of stewed root vegetables, and hornfuls of sweet, frothy mead. The table surface is lacquered with grease and crumbs, a testament to last night's ale-fueled storytelling and the clan chef's alarming disregard for table manners. You grab a wooden plate massive enough to double as a small tabletop and heap on a thick slice of boar's shoulder, the crackling rind popping under your fingertips like corn kernels in a hot pan. It's loud, communal, and oddly comforting. An Iron Age all-you-can-eat buffet, minus the salad bar, and with a lot more swearing about who gets the last hunk of boar. You settle onto a bench beside Freitas, who cheerfully slaps you on the back so hard you almost launch your mead horn into orbit. Laughing, you spear a cube of pickled turnip and pop it into your mouth, its sour tang snapping your senses awake, almost like chugging a shot of the strongest liquor, just to remember you're alive. Someone across from you is regaling the hall with the tale of Ragnar Lodbrok's siege of Paris in 845 A.D., when Norse longships drifted up the Seine and the locals barely had time to hide their children before the invaders demanded tribute in gold and goats. You bite back a snort, "Tribute goats, really?" and instead nod sagely, as though you were there in the trenches, making the clergy squeal over their unpaid taxes. A warm breeze drifts in through the open windows, carrying hints of the fjord salt air and the squeal of gulls overhead. You lift your mead horn and take a generous swig. The honeyed sweetness and whisper of carbonation tickle the back of your throat as if tiny bees are cheering you on from inside the horn itself. It's enough to make you nearly forget the roar of battle drums looming on the horizon till you remember that later today you'll be trading this bench for a shield wall, a shield enemy arrow that reminds you of a fly at a picnic. Midway through tearing off a hunk of coarse rye bread, you glance at a small wooden cup tucked near the coals. Rumor says Shieldmaidens sometimes drank from skull cups, looted in battle, believing the fallen's bravery infused their mead. A strange archaeological fact drifts through your mind. In some graves at the Oseberg ship, fine bones of both men and women were discovered alongside fragments of elaborately carved drinking horns, suggesting these feasts blended family gatherings with sacred rites. Historians still debate whether those horns were purely status symbols for war chiefs or actual vessels for toasting Odin before battle. Either way, you're raising yours right now in solidarity, just maybe not with an actual skull. Between hearty bites and roaring laughter, you catch yourself humming a tune you learned as a child, one that ancient skalds used to sing before the Battle of Stamford Bridge in 1066 A.D., another clash that almost marked the end of the Viking Age. You tap your fingers on the table to the rhythm, feeling a camaraderie deeper than any shield wall. This feast isn't just about filling bellies. It's a ritual to steel your spirit. The clang of horns on shields and the low murmur of longship crews beyond the hall remind you that soon the laughter will fade, replaced by the steady thrum of oars and the clash of iron. But for now, between mouthfuls of sweet mead and slabs of smoky meat, you savor each moment of warmth, light-hearted banter, and the sticky sweetness of victory yet to come. You wipe grease from your chin and lean back, shield at the ready, and courage swelling in your chest, because no rune-carved talisman or war paint can match the power of breaking bread and possibly a few table legs with your sisters before the dawn of battle. You slip away from the last echoes of laughter and hoof-stomped mead barrels, following a narrow corridor lit only by beeswax candles whose honeyed scent mingles with the faint iron tang of armor. Ahead, A small stone chamber awaits its low ceiling, draped in coarse woolen banners depicting winged figures, Valkyries poised above battlefields like silent sentinels. The air here feels sacred, as if the walls themselves have absorbed centuries of whispered prayers. You step inside and join the circle of shield maidens, each kneeling on a rough-hewn bent shoulders, touching in silent solidarity. A hush falls over the group, broken only by the distant creak of the longhouse door swinging closed and the soft drip of condensation off the stone walls. You press your palms together, fingertips trembling with anticipation, and draw in a steady breath of turf smoke and beeswax. It's the kind of calm that makes your heart pound loud enough for Freya to hear, reminding you that soon it will be drowned out by the clash of steel. Around you, the women bow their heads, and together you begin a low, breathy chant, each word hushed but resolute, like reciting a password to an audience of gods. Helga, you whisper, ignoring that it isn't your real name. Guide us home. The syllables roll off your tongue in Old Norse, half known, but charged with meaning. You can almost feel invisible feathers brushing your spine, as if an unseen Valkyrie has just settled there ready to carry you across the river, if fate deems it. Somewhere beyond the chamber walls, a young shield maiden's voice cracks on a high note, proof that even the bravest hearts can falter under the weight of the divine. As your chant gathers momentum, you picture the Valkyries swooping across the sky, their wings stirring winds that smell of salt spray and distant conquests. It reminds you of the Battle of Svolder in the year 1000 AD, when King Olaf's fleet was ambushed, and some survivors claimed they heard ethereal voices guiding them through the fog. Those whispers, legend says, were Valkyries calling the worthy to Valhalla. You smile at the thought. If they can find lost Norsemen in a sea of warships, they can probably spot you in that turquoise bikini you wore last summer. Historians still debate whether those voices were divine or just the wind bouncing off gulls' wings, but either way, you're banking on both tonight. Between each soft invocation, your breath catches as you brush fingertips against the rough stone altar at the circle's center. The surface is pitted with ancient chip marks, maybe from runes long erased, and you imagine each nick as a prayer carved by women much like yourself. Archaeologists once found a bone whistle in a warrior's grave at Birka, speculating it was used to mimic Valkyrie calls and rally the troops. Historians still debate whether those whistles served as ritual instruments or child's toys handed off in desperation. You hug the thought of blowing such a whistle mid-battle. Hey, team parties this way, but tonight you content yourself with silence. The chant shifts gears as the circle leans forward, voices synchronizing into a single breathy hum. You feel a subtle vibration in your chest, as if the song itself is a living thing pulsing through your bones. It's oddly comforting, like that first sip of mead after a long march, only more mystical. The candle flames dance in your vision's periphery, casting wing-shaped shadows that flicker across everyone's face, making each woman look both fierce and serene. You lock eyes with Freydis across the circle, her gaze steady, unwavering, reminding you that strength isn't born from steel alone, but from knowing someone's got your back. As the final note lingers in the air, you bow your head and exhale, letting the vibration fade into the cold stone. The world feels hushed, as if the very air is listening for the Valkyrie's reply. You brush a strand of hair behind your ear, the leather thongs at your temples whispering against your skin. Somewhere in the longhouse, a horn sounds a signal that the time for chanting is over and the time for marching has come. Your pulse quickens. You taste salt on your lips, whether from the fjord breeze or emerging nerves, you can't tell. Rising slowly, you press your talisman-wrapped hand to your chest, feeling the rune's gentle warmth against your ribs. You step out of the chamber and into the hall, where the clan's warriors gather, the hum of readiness buzzing like dragonflies over still water. There's no dramatic fanfare, just the steady thrum of determination carried in every thump of your heart. You know that when your feet finally hit the longship's deck, the Valkyrie's whisper will be with you, guiding every swing of your blade and every beat of your heart. And as you shoulder your shield and grip your sword's hilt, you carry the chant in your blood, a quiet power, more enduring than any pigment or rune. In a few moments, the cry of war will rise, but for now, you hold this sacred silence close, trusting that unseen wings will lift you when you falter and whisper your name as your story unfolds among the ranks of those who dared to call upon the Valkyries themselves. You slip from the hushed sanctity of the chant chamber into the roaring heart of the smithy, where the air shimmers like a living thing. The forge glares at you with blistering heat, its coals glowing a furious orange that makes your shadow dance on the soot-blackened walls. Each hammer strike rings through the cavernous space, clang, 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 a relentless rhythm that vibrates through your bones like the thrum of a war drum. Sparks leap off the anvil in golden arcs, scattering like fireflies at a midsummer festival, and for a moment you swear you can taste embers on your tongue. You step closer, feeling the soles of your boots stick to the ash-layered floor, and pause to breathe in the pungent smell of burning charcoal and molten metal, a heady perfume no modern cologne could ever match. The smith, a broad-shouldered giant in soot-stained leather, pauses mid-strike to nod at you, sweat rolling down his bald head in rivulets that hiss as they hit the hot iron. His arms ripple with muscle as he raises the hammer again, the tool falling with a thunderous whack onto the glowing blade laid across the anvil's horn. You wince at the impact, marveling that anyone could wield such power day in and day out without turning to instant charcoal. Beside the anvil, a row of half-forged blades rests on a wooden rack, each blank shimmering with promise. You step forward, drawn as if by some magnetic force, and your fingertips itch for contact. Drawing a deep breath, you grasp the haft of a newly forged sword, its tang still hot enough to steam your palm through your leather glove. A bead of sweat drips down your temple, hissing on the blade's spine like a kettle on the boil. The heat is almost unbearable, throbbing through your glove into your flesh, a fiery massage that jolts your senses to life. It's like dunking your hand into a lava lamp at a spa from Asgard and daring it to bubble you into submission. You flex your fingers, feeling the pulse of the blade's latent energy shudder under your touch. Somehow, this slab of red-hot iron feels more alive than most breathing creatures you've met. You let the sword slide from the anvil into the quenching trough, the blade plunging into icy water with a hiss so loud it startles a flock of sparrows roosting near the rafters. Steam roils upward, swirling around your face and condensing on your lashes until they sparkle like frost-kissed spiderwebs. You cup your palms and splash the cooling liquid onto your cheeks, tasting the chill against your lips as if licking morning dew from a glacier. It's a stark contrast fire and ice colliding in a dance as old as the forge itself. You can't help but grin because no skincare regimen back home promises a thermal shock treatment quite like this. In the flickering light, you recall the arrival of the great heathen army in East Anglia, circa 865 AD, when Norse warriors, men and women alike, landed upon English shores in waves wielding blades as new as the fury in their hearts. Shield maidens of legend stand shoulder to shoulder with berserkers in those sagas, their swords singing in the wind as they charged into earthen forts and timber walls. It's said that some of those blades bore the mysterious inscription Plolfbertpalas, marking them as the finest steel in Christendom, if you could find one. Historians still debate whether those swords were forged in distant Rhineland workshops and traded through secret channels, or if cunning Scandinavian smiths mastered the same techniques on home soil. Regardless, holding a hot Ulfbert blade, real or replica, would send shivers down the spine of any warrior worth her salt. A curious archaeological note flickers at the edge of your thoughts. In a burial mound near Hiddeby, researchers uncovered traces of bone ash mixed into the iron bloom, suggesting smiths sometimes crushed cattle bones into their ore to boost the steel's carbon content. Historians still debate whether this was a crude attempt at early alloying to sharpen blades or a ritual sacrifice meant to transfer an animal's spirit into the steel. You smirk, picturing an ancient forge master whispering to a pile of bones, "Go on, give me that extra edge," and then slipping on a bone shard like a deranged cobbler. Either way, you run your thumb along the blade's newly quenched edge, sensing a spark of ancestral power hidden in every microscopic crystal of hardened steel. With a final nod to the smith, you lift the sword and let its weight settle in your hand, familiar and relentless, as though it had been waiting just for you. You feel the echo of every hammer blow still resonating through the metal like a war cry you hadn't yet sung. In that moment, the sword isn't merely a tool, it's a companion whose spirit stirred to life under the anvil's hammer, ready to carve your story into history. You sheath the blade, the leather scabbard sliding home with a satisfying thwap, and step back into the longhouse's corridor. Behind you, the forge's glow dims as the smith turns to his next project, leaving you carrying the heat, the hum of the anvil, and the whispered promise of victory into the next ritual. You slip from the heat and echo of the forge into a narrow passage where the air grows cooler, thick with the scent of pine resin and damp stone. Flickering torch sconces cast long shadows on rough-hewn walls as you follow them to a hidden alcove, the sacred bathhouse. The door made of aged oak bands and iron rivets creaks as you push it open, revealing a shallow pool fed by a steady trickle of cold water. Steam rises in wisps, curling around your shoulders like ghostly fingers begging for warmth. Standing at the edge, you pause to drink in the sensory symphony, the sharp tang of crushed pine needles carried on the water's surface, the subtle sweetness of birch bark smoke from smoldering logs hidden under the floorboards, and the faint echo of dripping rivulets in the vaulted ceiling above. The water is as clear as glacier melt, but you know it's laced with aromatic oils pressed from juniper berries and spruce tips enough to open your pores and chase away any lingering battle stench. You step forward toes, meeting the smooth river stones lining the bottom, and shiver as the cold bites at your skin like a frosty wake-up call from the North Sea itself. Carefully, You peel away the layers of leather belts, linen tunic, and woolen underdress, each piece falling into a rough basket beside the pool. You brush aside a stray tumble of hair and slip in up to your waist, the temperature so bracing it feels like dunking yourself into the world's most extreme cryotherapy chamber, only without the fancy sign-up form or the chance to accidentally freeze your eyebrows. A deep exhale sends ripples across the water, carrying the mingled aromas across the chamber. You lean back against a smooth stone ledge, letting the water cradle your lower back while your shoulders catch the cool air. The immersion feels like a baptism of resolve. You remember the year 866 A.D., when the great heathen army marched into York and claimed the city's walls with a ferocity that stunned the Anglo-Saxon defenders. Those shield maidens no doubt scrubbed themselves down in chalices before storming the gates, believing a clean body might stiffen a warrior's spirit. You could almost swear you hear the echoes of their laughter, bracing more from the cold than from courage, and you press your hands to the water's surface, imagining you're washing away every trace of last season's raids and any pesky superstition about frostbite. As you sink deeper, you notice smooth, pale stones scattered along the bath's floor, imported pumice from as far as Sicily, if rumors hold true, meant to exfoliate rough skin. Archaeologists uncovered similar pumice fragments at Birka, suggesting Viking bath rituals included an early form of foot scrub, turning a sacred rite into what modern influencers would call a luxury spa treatment. Historians still debate whether those stones were valued for practical cleanliness or employed in elaborate purification ceremonies to honor Frigg and Freya. Either way, you run your heel across one and stifle a chuckle, thinking you'll never look at a pedicure the same way again. Your breath steams in the cool air as you tilt your head back, feeling hairs rise on the nape of your neck from goosebumps. The water laps gently against your ribs, whispering of renewal. You imagine strands of tension unraveling from your muscles, pooling into the bath's depths like spilled mead. A stray pine needle brushes your forehead, and you lift your hand to flick it away, a tiny reminder that even in sanctity, nature reigns supreme. You gaze up at the dark ceiling, lit by drifting shafts of candlelight, and the stillness soothes your racing heart more effectively than any lullaby. Memories of the raging forge and the echoing anvil fade as you let the bath's magic wash over you. You picture stepping into the next ritual, donning your feathered cloak or running runic ink over your shield with skin as fresh as a new sail in the wind. It's a powerful metaphor, submerging your fears in icy water and emerging ready to face the storm. You allow a wry smile, thinking how few modern warriors endure such extremes. Most would settle for a lukewarm shower and a scented soap labeled Nordic Breeze. A distant drip marks the time, urging you to linger just a moment longer in this baptismal pause. You trace runes along the water's edge, with a finger recalling the flicker of Odin's eye and the promise of divine favor sealed in earlier rituals. Even the cold feels like a gift, now a bracing reminder that every sensation, from the heat of the forge to the chill of this pool, forges you into something stronger. At last, you push yourself up, letting droplets cascade down your shoulders, and reach for the coarse woolen wrap draped on a nearby bench. As you draw it around your body, the fibers absorb the last of the bath's warmth and cling to your skin. You step out onto a thick mat of pine boughs, the needles tickling your feet, and pat the moisture from your hair. You feel purified, liberated from doubt, as though the bath has scrubbed away not only physical grime, but every shadow of hesitation. Stepping back into the corridor's torchlit glow, you carry with you a quiet confidence born of cold immersion, an inner fire rekindled by the frost. Ahead, the feathered cloak awaits its raven feathers rustling like promises of flight. The next chapter in this sacred preparation beckons, but for now you relish the sacred bath's gift, a body refreshed, a mind unburdened, and a spirit sharpened like the finest steel. You emerge from the bathhouse's quiet hush into a corridor where the torchlight dances against your damp skin, the woolen wrap still clinging to your shoulders. Ahead, draped over a low beam, hangs the feathered cloak, its raven plumage glinting like shards of midnight glass. You pause to take it in dozens of glossy black feathers splayed out in a fan, each one whispering secrets of stormy skies and unseen watchers. The air feels charged, as if the cloak itself hums with the promise of flight. Stepping closer, you reach out and brush a fingertip along the mantle's collar. The feathers are surprisingly soft, like the silky fringe on a finely tailored coat your grandmother might have smiled at if she'd been brave enough to rock Viking chic. You let out a quiet chuckle, because who needs designer labels when you can wear literal bird wings? Tugging the cloak free, you feel its weight settle onto your shoulders, each feather brushing your neck in a series of tiny, ticklish caresses. It's like 1,000 gentle whispers urging you forward. You fasten the leather ties beneath your chin, the rough-hide cords sliding through your fingers with a supple ease. With each knot, you feel a little more invincible, like strapping on an invisible jetpack, minus the risk of a mid-air meltdown. The cloak's bulk shifts as you move, rustling softly like leaves stirred by a breeze. And for a moment, you half expect to hear distant wing beats echoing through the longhouse. As you cast your gaze around the hall, the cloak's raven feathers catch every flicker of flame, throwing glints of obsidian light onto the walls. You imagine flocking alongside Hugin and Munin Odin's own ravens, scouting the battlefields below. It brings to mind the siege of Paris in 845 A.D., when Norse fleets swept up the Seine like a ravenous tide, and some warriors claimed ravens guided them to hidden inlets. Historians still debate whether those birds were Odin's messengers or just opportunistic scavengers showing the way to fresh fish guts. Either way, you're banking on both divine favor and raven-level navigation. You press a palm against the cloak's breast, feeling the delicate quills prick gently through the fabric lining. It's oddly grounding, like wearing a hug made of nature's finest accessories. The scent of pine and damp earth clings to the feathers, mingling with the residual tang of mead from the feast hall. You breathe in, letting the aroma fill your lungs, and suddenly the world narrows to the flutter of feathers against your skin and the steady beat of your own heart. Walking toward the longhouse entrance, your footsteps fall with surprising stealth, the cloak's soft rustle muffling each footstep. It reminds you of feline hunters padding through underbrush, silent, lethal, and mysteriously graceful. You glance down at the cloak's hem sweeping the floor and hesitate to think of the laundry back home, complaining about lint. Who knew Viking battle prep involved less tumble drying and more sacred avian couture? Along the corridor, torchlight reveals shadows that twist and stretch, and you imagine the black wings extending beyond your shoulders, transforming you into an avenging spirit. Your sister-in-arms once told a story of shield maidens donning raven feathers before the Battle of Stamford Bridge in 1066 A.D., believing the cloak would shield them from aerial arrows. Archaeologists later found fragments of raven bones at a warrior's grave in Trondheim, suggesting those women truly carried bird fetishes to war. Historians still debate whether those were trophies from hunts or sacred relics meant to channel the bird's keen eyes. Either way, you brush a feather between your fingertips, feeling that ancient conviction flit through your veins. You step out into the pre-dawn chill, the longhouse door closing behind you with a thud that echoes in the courtyard. The ground beneath your boots is cold, dew-soaked stone, and you shiver as the cloak settles around your torso like a living barrier against both frost and fear. Each feather seems to pulse with latent energy like a battery charged by storm clouds. You wrap the cloak tighter, adjusting its drape until it sits perfectly balanced, neither too heavy nor too loose. It's a master class in practicality and pageantry. A stray crow perched atop a fence squawks, and you pause to meet its glittering eye. For an instant, the world feels suspended, two ravens sizing each other up in a silent pact. You tip your head and offer a mock salute, half expecting the bird to call back in approval. It's a small moment, but somehow it cements your confidence. If you can hold your own in the company of Odin's scouts, you can face anything that waits beyond the longship's rail. Turning away, you follow the cobblestone path toward the clan's longship, its hull rocking gently at the water's edge. The cloak's feathers brush your arms as you move, and the sound is hypnotic, a soft susurrus that drowns out doubts. You recall that in some Norse rites ravens were sacrificed, and their wings woven into garments to invoke protection. The practice faded over time, leaving only whispered tales and a few scattered feather fragments. Historians still debate whether it was an early form of religious zeal or a pragmatic attempt at camouflage among birds of prey. You decide it doesn't matter. What counts is the cloak's power to stand between you and the unknown. As you reach the longship's gangplank, the first pale glow of sunrise smears across the horizon. You step aboard the raven-feathered mantle, swirling around you like shadowed waves. The crew's murmurs hush as they notice the cloak's dark majesty, and you feel every eye turn your way, some in envy, others in awe. You haul yourself up the side and settle on deck, the wood beneath your feet, worn smooth by countless voyages. The cloak's feathers splay around you, a circle of black, shimmering hope. You lean against the ship's rail, breathing in the salty breeze, and tuck a stray feather behind your ear. The cloak's weight shifts gently as the vessel rolls with the tide, a comforting reminder that you're cloaked in both myth and resilience. Ahead lies the clash of shields, the roar of steel, and the promise of legend, yet wrapped in raven feathers you feel untouchable, guided by unseen wings toward whatever destiny awaits beyond the dawn. You step onto the dew-slick deck of the longship raven feather cloak, settling around your shoulders like a living shroud, and your gaze falls on the shield propped against the railing. Its wooden surface is rough-hewn, but sturdy, just the sort of thing you'd want between your ribs and a flying axe. You trail your finger along the curved rim, feeling the grain's subtle peaks and valleys. This shield is more than mere defense. It's a canvas for your silent prayers, and now comes the moment to carve your fate into its edge. You retrieve a slender carving knife from your belt, its polished bone handle fitting snugly in your palm. The blade is keen, sharp enough to slice through leather, or if it ever came to it, a stubborn troll's hide. You press the tip into the rim's wood, the fibers giving way with a soft shh that echoes across the still waters. It's the same hush that fell over the clan as you carved your runes earlier, only this time there's no elder guiding you, just your steady hand and the rhythm of your breath. You lean in close, nostrils flaring as the scent of fresh-cut pine mingles with salt spray. It's a heady perfume like mountain air bottled and doused in seawater. With each measured stroke, you sever tiny splinters that cascade onto the deck like rain. Your hand moves with practiced precision, tracing the algiz rune for protection. First, it looks like the antlers of a stag reaching to the sky. Beneath it, you carve Tiwaz, the arrow of victory, its pointed form aiming forward across the shield's curve. You pause to let the morning light catch the sharp edges, the glow reminding you of the Battle of Hastings in 1066 A.D., when Norman cavalry broke Saxon shields in thunderous waves. You probably wouldn't survive a charge like that without both steel and rune, so it's comforting to etch this talismanic edge into your own shield. A sudden breeze flutters through the raven cloak, stirring goosebumps across your forearms. You seize the moment to slide the knife deeper for the next symbol, answers, the rune of divine communication. This one feels like carving words into your own soul, a promise that gods may yet hear your whispered plea when steel sings. You nibble your lower lip and hum softly as though sending a private message into the wind. Keep me safe, guide my blade, and bring me home. The wood vibrates under your finger as if acknowledging the vow. It's almost ASMR-like, the scratch of blade on wood, the soft crackle of oars beyond the rail, and the light thrum of your heartbeat in your ears. Between runes, you catch sight of a curious engraving already on the shield's center, a crude image of Yggdrasil's roots and branches, a mark left by a previous owner. You pause to trace the ancient lines, running your thumb over the shallow valleys. Archaeologists once uncovered similar shared shields at a burial site near Gamla Uppsala, inscribed by multiple warriors over generations, like an old family heirloom passed from sister to sister, each adding her own story. Historians still debate whether those layered carvings mark shifts in allegiance or merely celebrated personal triumphs, but either way, you're honored to continue the tradition. You inhale the briny air, tasting its tang against your tongue, and press onward with the carving knife. Below Ansu's, you carve Berkano for rebirth, an intimate prayer that if you fall today, you may rise anew in Valhalla's mead hall. The blade slices through fibers and knots like a hot knife through butter, each segment of oak, granting you a surge of quiet confidence. You pause for a heartbeat to admire your handiwork, a row of runes dancing along the rim, each symbol, a promise, protection, victory, guidance, and renewal. A stray gull cries overhead, mocking your solemn ritual with a squawk that echoes through the mist. You glance skyward and wink, imagining that it's one of Odin's scouts checking on your progress. You slide the carving knife into its sheath and brush away the last of the wood shavings, the crisp debris falling to the deck in a miniature avalanche. The shield feels lighter now, as though the runes have lifted unseen weight from its core. You lean back against the ship's rail, pressing the flat of your palm against the freshly carved rim, feeling the subtle ridges under your skin. Each groove sinks into your hand like a tactile prayer bead, counting off hopes rather than sins. You remember the anthem you hummed in the chant chamber and hum it again low and steady, letting the melody ripple through the runes and out across the waves. The morning sun breaks through a bank of fog, illuminating your carvings in a pale gold glow, and for a fleeting moment, you're certain you hear faint whispers of approval, whether from the gods or your fellow shield maidens, you can't tell. An archaeological footnote drifts through your mind at a Viking site in Hiddeby. Researchers found shields painted with swirling animal motifs, but lacking runic carvings, suggesting some warriors preferred color over etchings. Historians still debate whether they feared angering the wood spirits by gouging the grain or simply favored a bolder aesthetic. You pat your shield fondly, grateful for the choice you've made and for the sturdy oak that yielded to your craft. Below deck, the drumbeat of oars begins in earnest, a low, insistent thrum like a restless heartbeat. You stand gripping the shield in one hand and your sword in the other, the carved rim nestled against your hip. The runes, a silent chorus of urging voices, seem to hum in unison with the rowing crew. You adjust your stance feet, braced against the planks, and lift the shield to test its balance. It rings with a clear tone, as if singing an invitation to the feast of steel to come. You glance at your sisters standing along the starboard rail, each brandishing shields etched with their own prayers. Together, you form an unspoken packed wood and runes, steel and sinew, woven into a single promise that you will fight as one. With the tide shifting beneath the hull, you step forward into the shallow surf water, lapping at your boots. Each step carries you closer, to battle closer to the clash of axes and the roar of war cries echoing off distant cliffs. As you lift the shield overhead and press its rim against your forearm, you feel the runes nestle perfectly into the curve of your arm, guiding every muscle fiber with unseen strength. This shield, once blank wood, is now a talisman carved in your own blood oath, a testament to rituals past and present. With a final breath of sea air, you brace yourself and stride into the frothy surf runes, gleaming ready to etch your story onto the annals of legend. Continuous and unbroken, the narrative flows on each carved rune, a stanza in the saga you're about to write with sword and shield. Continuous and unbroken, the narrative flows on each carved rune, a stanza in the saga you're about to write with sword and shield. Continuous and unbroken, the narrative flows on each carved rune, a stanza in the saga you're about to write with sword and shield. Continuous and unbroken, the narrative flows on each carved rune, a stanza in the saga you're about to write with sword and shield. Continuous and unbroken, the narrative flows on each carved rune, a stanza in the saga you're about to write with sword and shield. Continuous and unbroken, the narrative flows on each carved rune, a stanza in the saga you're about to write with sword and shield. Continuous and unbroken, the narrative flows on each carved rune, a stanza in the saga you're about to write with sword and shield. Continuous and unbroken, the narrative flows on each carved rune, a stanza in the saga you're about to write with sword and shield. Continuous and unbroken, the narrative flows on each carved rune, a stanza in the saga you're about to write with sword and shield. Continuous and unbroken, the narrative flows on each carved rune, a stanza in the saga you're about to write with sword and shield. Continuous and unbroken, the narrative flows on each carved rune, a stanza in the saga you're about to write with sword and shield. Continuous and unbroken, The narrative flows on each carved rune, a stanza in the saga you're about to write with sword and shield. Continuous and unbroken, the narrative flows on each carved rune, a stanza in the saga you're about to write with sword and shield. Continuous and unbroken, the narrative flows on each carved rune, a stanza in the saga you're about to write with sword and shield. Continuous and unbroken, the narrative flows on each carved rune, a stanza in the saga you're about to write with sword and shield. You step off the longship onto the dew-damp shore, the raven feather cloak still brushing your shoulders, and follow a narrow path through bracken and bent grasses toward a low earthen mound crowned with time-worn stones. The land here hums with quiet expectancy, damp moss exhaling its forest fragrance and distant seabirds wheeling overhead in soft cries. You carry a small woven basket inside a round loaf of barley bread baked yesterday, its crust crackling under your fingers and a horn of honeyed mead froth still clinging to the rim like stubborn barnacles. Kneeling at the base of the mound, you let the bread rest on the moss, its rough surface imprinting a faint pattern of grains into the soft green cushion. You press down gently, eyes closed, feeling the cool earth give beneath your palm, as if welcoming the gift into its ancient memory. A breeze stirs carrying the tang of salt spray from the fjord and the faint, sweet smoke of last night's fires mingling with the sharp scent of juniper berries still clinging to your cloak. You lean forward, placing one hand on the bread, and whisper softly, "To you who came before, may your courage guide me." Reaching for the mead horn, you tip it slowly, letting the amber liquid pool around the bread and flow into the earth like liquid sunshine. The sound is a soft glug-glug, a meditation in motion, almost ASMR worthy if whispered into a bard's lute instead of spilling onto sacred soil. You can't help but smirk. Pouring artisanal mead onto the ground sounds like a Viking's version of dumping craft beer in a hipster's backyard. But, this is no joke. It's a covenant with ancestors whose names you'll never know yet, whose valor courses through your veins. In the hush that follows, you recall the great Yule blot of 800 AD, when entire villages across Scandinavia paused mid-feast to pour mead and lay loaves at stone altars, believing that kin long gone still dined with gods during the midwinter night. Historians still debate whether those communal offerings honored the Aesir, the dead, or some twilight meeting of both, like a cosmic potluck where no one is sure who's actually invited. But here, under frost-bright skies, you don't need certainty. You simply feel the weight of tradition press into your bones, anchoring you to every shield maiden who knelt before these same stones. A sudden rustle in the bracken draws your attention to a single fallen leaf, its veins etched like miniature runes. You pick it up, press it between your fingers, and tuck it beside the bread, a small offering of nature folded into the ceremony. Archaeologists have unearthed shards of charred bread and mead-stained cairn stones at Celtic Norse shrines, suggesting that some offerings were baked in underground ovens to purify them before the ritual. Historians still debate whether those ovens were sacred hearths for mortals or secret portals to the underworld, but you like to think they doubled as Viking-era sous vide. You rise slowly, brushing stray crumbs and droplets of mead from your tunic, and stand before the ancestral mound. The morning sun breaks through a veil of mist, casting pale beams across the stone markers. You feel a gentle warmth spread through your chest, as if the spirits of your forebears have accepted your gifts and turn their unseen faces toward you in blessing. With a final nod, you step back and gather your basket, the bread now fused to earth and the mead soaked into loam. The path back to the longship lies before you, and each footfall carries the echo of ancient footsteps long vanished. You lift your chin, the horizon brightening with promise, and tuck your hand around the horn at your waist, knowing that whatever comes next, you carry more than steel and feathers. You carry the strength of countless ancestors whose silent vigil continues in the whisper of the wind through these sacred stones. You kneel at the ship's prow, the wood slick with morning dew, and the cloak's raven feathers fanned out like dark wings against the pale sky. The long ship rocks gently beneath you, each swell of the tide a soft pulse that echoes through your bones. Salt mist clings to your cheeks and eyelashes, and you taste it on your lips, a bracing reminder of the sea's might. Ahead, the horizon glows with a promise of dawn, and behind you, the muted murmur of your sisters assembles into a single breath, waiting. In one hand, you clutch the hilt of your sword, its leather-wrapped grip calloused from countless drills. In the other, you hold the horn of mead you saved from the feast. You tilt your head upward, letting the first pale rays of sun warm your face and sift through the raven feathers above you. Your heart hammers like a smith's hammer on red-hot steel, each beat urging you onward. You draw in a trembling breath, feeling the salty spray pepper your throat. This is your final invocation, your last prayer to gods of war and fertility alike, hoping they'll grant you strength to strike true or the blessing of safe return, whichever path fate chooses. Softly, you raise the horn to your lips and whisper to Tyr that I may stand fearless in battle, to Freya that life may bloom again in fields I leave behind. You pour a small measure of mead into the frothing sea, the liquid curling into the waves and vanishing like a whispered secret. The mead's sweet aroma drifts back to you for a moment, mingling with seaweed and driftwood. You shiver as you lower the horn, its empty weight a stark contrast to the full hope you poured out. It's as intimate as tracing the veins in your hand, a silent pact between you and powers unseen. A gull's cry slices through the hush, and you bow your head, letting the wind carry your plea. You feel a quiver in your chest, a living echo of the sacred chants you uttered moments ago. The carved runes on your shield's rim tingle under your palm like tiny embers, breathing life into your promise. You run a finger along each groove, Algiz Tiwaz, Ansus Berkano, renewing your resolve under the sky's vast expanse. Around you, the longship's timbers creak with anticipation, the oarlocks clinking softly as the crew readies their strokes. You recall the winter of 930 A.D., when Iceland's Thing Assembly saw shield maidens stand by chieftains in disputes over land and inheritance, rare evidence that women's voices once shaped law as fiercely as they shaped battle lines. In those disputes, shield maidens were said to carry small offerings of amber and wool to the altar stones, believing a bride's blooms invited prosperity to clan holdings. Historians still debate whether those legal gestures were true invocations of Frigg's favor or merely symbolic gestures to mollify rival factions. Nonetheless, you trust both perspective and practice as you kneel here today. Your knees press into the damp wood, cool and unwavering. You close your eyes, feeling the breath of ocean currents swirl around your neck, lifting your hair and the raven cloak's feathers in a silent dance. A single thought threads through your mind. Whatever comes, comes swiftly, and let my name be carried on wind and wave. The horizon brightens into gold, and for an instant the line between sea and sky blurs as though the world itself listens. Rising to your feet, you sheath the horn and square your shoulders, the cloak's feathers settling into place like mythic armor. The tide laps at the hull beneath you, urging the longship forward as if the gods themselves have imparted momentum. You lift your sword and strike its flat against the shield's rim, a crisp ring that rings out across the water. In that echo, you hear destiny's promise, the final invocation answered, the ritual complete, and a fate forged by both divine whim and unbreakable human will. Continuous and unbroken, your journey surges on. You step with measured calm along the dew-slicked deck, each footfall a quiet drumbeat that melds with the sea's soft susurrus. The longship rocks beneath you in a gentle rhythm, the wood planks whispering under your boots like pages turning in an ancient saga. Salt-laced mist clings to your cloak's raven feathers, and you taste brine on your lips, an intimate reminder that you walk on the edge of worlds where water meets sky and fate hangs in the balance. Your hand trails along the carved runes of your shield fingertips, following the grooves of algiz and tiwas as though reading secret instructions etched by ancestors. Each touch sends a subtle thrill through your arm, like the faintest buzz of a tuning fork under skin. You pause mid-step to tilt your head and let the wind tug at your hair, the strands tangling in leather thongs with a soft snick that feels oddly comforting, like the click of a seatbelt before takeoff. Only this ride carries more risk and better mead. Ahead, the first pale sliver of sun crests the horizon, gilding the sea in molten gold. You inhale, filling your lungs with the sharp scent of tarred ropes and pinewood pitch. It's as heady as a forest bonfire diffused through a sailmaker's workshop, and far more invigorating than any mountain air you've ever sampled. Behind you, the hushed whispers of your sisters blend into a low hum, a chorus of readiness threaded through the creak of oars in leather thongs and the distant beat of war drums on the shore. As you march toward the bow, you recall the founding of Dublin in 841 AD, when Norse longships slipped into the Liffey's mouth and set up a trading settlement that would grow into a city famed for its hospitality and its Guinness. You can almost hear the clink of silver pennies in merchant stalls and the clamor of Gaelic voices. Historians still debate whether those so-called Viking settlers intermarried peacefully with locals or carved out their own enclaves by force. But either outcome sounds equally dramatic when you're eye to eye with a shield-bearing archer. You step over coiled ropes and past the curved prow carved into a snarling dragon's head, its painted eyes long since faded, but still brimming with silent menace. The dragon's timber grain is smooth beneath your palm, warmed by sunlight and countless hands. A puff of wind stirs your cloak's feathers, and for a heartbeat, you imagine yourself aboard a celestial vessel, the dragon's jaws parting to swallow the dawn. It's a vision that makes your heart flutter. Battlefield theatrics have always been half victory, half pageant. A sudden clatter draws your attention. A small cluster of glass beads tumbles from beneath, a combing sliding across the deck in a tiny, tinkling cascade. You stoop to scoop them up, emerald sapphire and amber hues that glint like captured fireflies. Archaeologists once uncovered similar beads in a Swedish burial mound alongside a woman's sword and shield, suggesting shield maidens may have applied eye paint with these tiny baubles before battle. Historians still debate whether those beads served as protective charms or simply a ritual vanity to stare down enemies with the fiercest eyeliner in Christendom. You tuck them into your pouch with a wry smile, battle-ready and beauty-ready all in one. As the sun edges higher, the longship's timbers creak in a soft chorus, each note resonating through your bones. You lift your chin, letting the warmth chase away the last traces of night's chill. A gull wheels overhead and squawks as if outraged by your silent procession, like an unmuted group chat squawking at 3 a.m. You wink at the bird, imagining it as one of Odin's eyes in the sky, and it answers with a deafening caw that echoes off distant cliffs. Your breath settles into a calm cadence as you reach the prow. Here, toes planted on the dragon's neck, you pause and look back along the length of the ship shields, arrayed like petals on a warflower steel, glinting feathers, rustling resolve, shining in every eye. It feels like stepping into the opening scene of a grand epic minus the dubious CGI and questionable dialogue. You draw in a final breath of salty air, letting it flood your senses with seaside freshness and iron-tinged anticipation. Without a word, you settle into stance shield, braced on your forearm, and sword hilt snug in your grip. The silent march has sharpened every nerve, each sense alight with the world's textures and sounds. The longship quivers as the rowers dip their oars in unison, the hull gliding forward in a hush deeper than any spoken vow. You exhale slowly, heart thudding in time, with oarlocks ready at last to meet the clash of shield wall and the roar of battle. Continuous and unbroken, your silent march threads into the next act of this saga, each measured step carrying you closer to the forge of legend. Continuous and unbroken, your silent march threads into the next act of this saga, each measured step carrying you closer to the forge of legend. Continuous and unbroken, your silent march threads into the next act of this saga, each measured step carrying you closer to the forge of legend. Continuous and unbroken, your silent march threads into the next act of this saga, each measured step carrying you closer to the forge of legend. Continuous and unbroken, your silent march threads into the next act of this saga, each measured step carrying you closer to the forge of legend. Continuous and unbroken, your silent march threads into the next act of this saga, each measured step carrying you closer to the forge of legend. Continuous and unbroken, your silent march threads into the next act of this saga, each measured step carrying you closer to the forge of legend. Continuous and unbroken, your silent march threads into the next act of this saga, each measured step carrying you closer to the forge of legend. Continuous and unbroken, your silent march threads into the next act of this saga, each measured step carrying you closer to the forge of legend. Continuous and unbroken, your silent march threads into the next act of this saga, each measured step carrying you closer to the forge of legend. Continuous and unbroken, your silent march threads into the next act of this saga, each measured step carrying you closer to the forge of legend. Continuous and unbroken, your silent march threads into the next act of this saga, each measured step carrying you closer to the forge of legend. Continuous and unbroken, your silent march threads into the next act of this saga, each measured step carrying you closer to the forge of legend. Continuous and unbroken, your silent march threads into the next act of this saga, each measured step carrying you closer to the forge of legend. Continuous and unbroken, your silent march threads into the next act of this saga, each measured step carrying you closer to the forge of legend. You settle into a low crouch at the longship's waist shield, resting against your calf, and let the dawn light warm the edge of your sword's blade. The steel still hums with the smith's heat, the metal singing a quiet promise under your fingertips as you raise it before you. Your breath comes slow and measured, each inhale tasting of salt spray and pine pitch, like opening a bottle of artisanal shampoo at a lumberjack convention. With deliberate care, you lift the sword until its point aligns with the sun's first ray, the polished steel igniting in liquid gold. You clutch the leather-wrapped hilt and press the flat of the blade against your palm, feeling the faint buzz as though the sword itself pulses with ancestral energy. It's an intimate moment, knife edge against skin, similar to nervously checking your phone's lock screen for an "I miss you" text at 2 a.m., except way more honorable and significantly less embarrassing. You whisper the ancient words taught by the elder, their syllables curling on your tongue like steam from a hot bath. Odin, grant my arm its surest sway. Freya, grant my life its sweetest day. The blade steel seems to glow in response, a subtle warmth coursing through the metal into your bones. A stray breeze tugs at your cloak, and you can almost hear a distant cheer, whether it's your sisters readying the shield wall or your own heartbeat amplified by anticipation. You can't tell. Your eyes drift over the ship's curve to the distant shoreline where warriors line up in tight ranks, shields interlocked and horns at their lips. The low drone of those horns, a war chant amplified by fjord walls, vibrates through the hull into your feet. It's a rhythm as ancient as the Battle of Edington in 878 A.D., when King Alfred cleaved Viking lines and forced a truce that shaped England's future. You'd be toast without preparation like this, no chance of survival, if you charged in thinking it was a frat party. A sudden clatter snaps you back to the moment a blade guard slides loose from a comrade's scabbard, skittering across the deck in a metallic plink. You grin because nothing sharpens resolve like someone else's minor wardrobe malfunction and catch the guard before it can clatter into the oars. You tuck it back, offering a quick wink that tightens your courage more than any rune-inscribed talisman ever could. Recalling a strange archaeological discovery, you think of that warrior grave at Birka, where isotopic analysis revealed the buried woman likely hailed from the southern Baltic. Not Birka itself, an unexpected origin for a shield maiden. Historians still debate whether she was a warrior, a high-status trader, or both hybrid roles. But one thing's clear, she carried a sword and a story. You lift your blade again and smile, imagining the tales that will cling to your name long after this morning. Your palms tighten, on the hilt knuckles whitening as you lower the sword in a sweeping arc until the point rests on the deck in front of you. The movement is fluid, almost dance-like, as though you were practicing choreography for a stage play in some modern festival, only with more real danger and fewer sponsorship logos. Each motion echoes in the hush of the crew's final breaths, the ship's timbers creaking in quiet approval. You press your forehead gently against the blade's pommel, closing your eyes to feel its cool solidity against your skin. In that reverent hush, you send your final plea into the morning air. Grant me strength, grant me speed, grant me life to sing my deeds. The wind catches the sword's tip and tilts it slightly as if the gods themselves accepted your invocation. Rising slowly, you press your back against the mast and let the sword settle upright beside you, the point embedded just so in the wood. You step back, draw a deep breath of brine and spruce, and lift your chin. The blade stands at attention, a silent sentinel awaiting the signal. The oars dip and rise in unison, now a torrent of purpose beneath your feet. You tuck one hand around the hilt and give the sword a soft rap clink, like tapping a mic to check it's on. The clear tone rings across the deck, and in that single note you hear the heartbeat of every warrior poised to charge. You step forward, blade in hand, ready to turn prayer into power, invocation into action, and ritual into roaring battle. Continuous and unbroken, your saga surges onward, each swing of steel carving a new line into the story you will leave behind. Continuous and unbroken, your saga surges onward, each swing of steel carving a new line into the story you will leave behind. Continuous and unbroken, your saga surges onward, each swing of steel carving a new line into the story you will leave behind. Continuous and unbroken, your saga surges onward, each swing of steel carving a new line into the story you will leave behind. Continuous and unbroken, your saga surges onward, each swing of steel carving a new line into the story you will leave behind. You stand at the threshold of the longship's gangplank raven cloak, rustling around your shoulders like a storm waiting to break. The rising sun paints the horizon in molten gold, and you can taste its warmth on your tongue as it ignites the sea's surface in trembling light. Your heart thunders in your chest, each beat a war drum calling you forward, and you flex your fingers around sword hilt and shield rim, feeling the reassuring heft of steel and carved runes beneath your palms. Remember how you braided leather into your hair to steady your spirit. Now that same resolve braces you for the swell of oars pushing against frothy waters. A roar erupts from the assembled crew at your back, the clan's cheers rising like tidal waves of sound. You probably won't survive this charge if you try to lip-sync your favorite battle anthem, so you keep your focused, narrow tunnel vision sharpened by salt spray and adrenaline. You step forward, the deck's wet planks whispering under your boots, and your cloak's feathers flatten against your arms, urging you on. It's as if the cloak itself has forged a pact with the wind, carry her unseen. You smirk, thankfully no laundry after this voyage. As you set one foot onto the longship's rail, you recall the Battle of Stiklestad in 1030 A.D., when King Olaf's forces clashed in swirling chaos, and Shieldmaidens are said to have fought alongside him, their cries echoing through the glacial fjords. Historians still debate whether those women stood in the front ranks or held back to rescue wounded kin, but either role sounds badass enough to earn your respect and maybe a spot in next year's saga anthology. You inch forward, shield up sword, at the ready, feeling the morning breeze whip your cloak into a raven-winged silhouette against the sky. Beneath you, the longship's hull cuts through the silver-tipped waves, each dip and rise resonating through your bones like the breath of a sleeping dragon. You lean over the rail, letting the salt spray tickle your cheek like nature's own face wash minus the fancy ingredients list. Around you, the rowers synchronize their strokes in a flowing tide of wood and muscle oars, slicing the water with rhythmic grace. The hull hums beneath your feet as though the ship itself shares your determination to meet whatever waits on the far shore. You press your shield against your forearm, runic carvings digging into your skin with a comforting firmness. The memory of pouring mead at the ancestral mound swells in your mind, how the earth drank your offering and sent its blessing back through song and stone. Now those same spirits ride on the wind, tangling with the brine and birch oil that cling to your skin. You whisper a quick prayer to each rune, protect me, guide me, hold me. The shield feels alive under your touch, a silent companion whose wood remembers every axe blow and shield bash it's ever taken. A gull cries above, slicing the dawn's hush with a caw that feels almost like a spectator's shout. Show 'em what you got. You tuck a stray feather behind your ear and tilt your head in acknowledgement as though greeting an old friend. It's a small moment, but in that exchange, you sense the curve of fate bending toward you, drawn by the magnetic pulse of your courage. The shoreline ahead looms into view, a stretch of dunes dotted with braided rushes and low embankments where enemy archers perch like hawks waiting to dive. You tighten your grip on sword and shield, letting the runes hum beneath your fingertips. You can almost hear the clash of steel in the distance, the first volley of arrows, the war cries that will fill the air. Yet in this suspended instant, you feel only clarity, the culmination of every oath, every rune carved, every braid knotted, every drop of mead poured into soil and sea. Your foot touches solid land. The longship grinds to a halt as rowers haul it onto the shallow's water, foaming around the oarlocks. You step off the gangplank, shield raised, and let the shoreline's damp sand swallow your boots. The cheers of your clan echo in your ears, blending with the cry of ravens perched on driftwood stumps. You take one final steadying breath, filling your lungs with salt and pine, and the raw electricity of battle's brink. Then with a fierce cry that merges into the clan's roar, you charge forward, sword raised, shield, angled raven cloak, billowing behind you like wings unfurled. The clash is imminent, the story poised to be carved into history. Continuous and unbroken, you surge into the fray, each step a stanza in the saga you will leave behind. Now the tide of battle swirls around you, and it's time to ease back into calm. Feel the heat of steel fade as sensory echoes soften. Imagine the sun dipping below distant hills, painting the waves in pastel hush. Your breath slows, heavy heartbeats become gentle lullabies. Warmth seeps into your limbs. Imagine a soft hearth glow behind closed eyes. Each exhale releases tension. Each inhale draws in quiet peace. The clashes of shields and war cries fade into memory's soft echo, replaced by the gentle rhythm of lapping waves and the rustle of raven feathers on your cloak. Feel the salt breeze transform into a tender whisper across your skin like a mother's caress at bedtime. Let every tense muscle unwind, unraveling like braided leather, undone at the end of a long journey. Picture twilight's hush, settling over the longhouse torches, dimming as the hearth's embers glow soft as lullaby embers. You did more than survive, you thrived in ritual and resolve. Now safe within memory's embrace, allow your eyes to close. Let your mind drift across fjords edged in moonlight, where ancestral spirits sing you to rest. Hush now. The ravens have flown home, the shields are stowed, and the sands of time cradle you softly. Sleep, shield maiden of legends, and dream of runes glowing gently under an endless northern sky. Let your spirit rest until dawn calls you again to weave dreams into story. Good night.